The transport ship landed with a soft thud on the grassy field. Princess Zara stepped out into the warm sunlight of Haven, a small farming planet on the edge of the galaxy. She looked around at the endless green fields that stretched to the horizon. This was very different from her home world with its crystal towers and floating cities. Zara wore a simple blue dress instead of her royal robes. Her father, Emperor Kelthan of the Velthani Empire, had told her this marriage would bring peace between their people and the humans. She had expected to marry a wealthy human lord, or maybe a powerful merchant, someone important enough to make this alliance worthwhile. A ground vehicle approached across the field. It was old and dusty, nothing like the sleek hover cars back home. The driver got out and walked toward her. He was tall with brown hair and kind eyes. His clothes were simple work clothes, and his hands looked rough from hard work. Princess Zara, he asked with a gentle smile. I'm Tom Miller. Welcome to Haven. Zara stared at him. This could not be her future husband. He looked like a common worker, not nobility. You are Tom Miller, the landowner. Tom nodded. Yes, Your Highness. I own these farms. He gestured to the fields around them. About 2,000 acres of grain and vegetables. But you are so young, Zara said. Tom looked maybe 30 years old. And you dress like a farmer, not a lord. Tom laughed softly. That's because I am a farmer, princess. I work these fields with my own hands. Come, let me show you around. They rode in his ground vehicle across bumpy dirt roads. Tom pointed out different crops and explained how they grew. He talked about rain patterns and soil types. Zara listened politely but felt confused. On her world, important people did not do physical work. They had servants for such things. Where are your servants? She asked. I have some workers during harvest time, Tom said. But mostly it's just me and my neighbor folks helping each other. They passed other farms with simple houses and small families working in gardens. Everyone waved at Tom and smiled. Children ran alongside their vehicle for short distances, laughing and calling his name. Tom waved back at everyone and seemed to know them all. The people like you, Zara observed. We help each other here, Tom explained. When someone's sick, we bring food. When storms damage crops, we all work together to fix things. That's how small communities survive. Zara had never seen anything like this. In the Velthani Empire, people bowed to royalty and kept their distance. Here, Tom seemed more like a friend to everyone than their leader. They arrived at Tom's house as the sun began to set. It was a modest two-story building made of wood and stone, very different from the metal and crystal palaces Zara knew, but it looked warm and welcoming with flower boxes under the windows and a small garden in front. Inside, the house was clean and comfortable. Simple furniture filled the rooms, and everything had a used, lived-in feeling. Tom showed her to a guest room on the second floor. I hope you'll be comfortable here until the wedding, he said. It's not much, but it's home. When is the wedding? Zara asked. Tomorrow evening, if that's okay with you. The whole community wants to celebrate with us. Tomorrow? Zara felt nervous. She barely knew this man, but the marriage contract was already signed by both their governments. This alliance was important for peace between their peoples. That evening, they ate dinner together in Tom's kitchen. He cooked the meal himself, something Zara had never seen a man do before. The food was simple but delicious, all grown on his own land. Tell me about your family, Zara said as they ate. Tom's expression became a little sad. My parents died when I was young. My grandfather raised me on this farm. He taught me everything about growing crops and taking care of the land. Is he still alive? No, he passed away 5 years ago. It's just me now. After dinner, Tom showed Zara around the main room. She noticed old photographs of the farm and family pictures on the walls. But one thing caught her attention above the fireplace. An old sword hung there in a simple wooden mount. The sword looked ancient but well cared for. Its blade was dark metal, and the handle was wrapped in worn leather. It seemed out of place in this peaceful farmer's home. That's an interesting decoration, Zara said, pointing at the sword. Tom glanced up at it. Oh, that old thing. It belonged to my grandfather and his grandfather before him. Family heirloom, you know. Been in the Miller family for generations. Do you know how to use it? Tom shrugged. Grandfather taught me some basic moves when I was a boy. But there's no need for swords on Haven. We're a peaceful planet. The wedding took place the next evening in the town square. The entire community came to celebrate. There were no fancy decorations or expensive clothes, just simple people sharing food and music. Zara wore a white dress that belonged to Tom's neighbor's daughter. Tom wore his best clothes, which were still simple farmer's clothing. The ceremony was short but meaningful. The local minister spoke about love, commitment, and building a life together. When Tom took Zara's hands and promised to care for her always, she saw something deep and sincere in his eyes. As they danced together under the stars, Zara wondered what her life would be like here. Tom seemed kind and good, but so different from what she expected. She looked up at this quiet man who was now her husband, and realized she knew very little about who he really was. 3 weeks had passed since Zara married Tom, and she was slowly getting used to life on Haven. Each morning, she woke to the sound of birds singing outside her window. Tom would already be up, making breakfast in the kitchen. He always had a warm smile for her, and asked how she slept. Zara spent her days learning about farm life. She helped Tom tend to the vegetable garden behind their house. At first, her soft hands got blisters from using tools, but Tom was patient, showing her the right way to hold a hoe and when to water the plants. "You're a fast learner," Tom said one morning, as they worked together in the garden, but as the days passed, Zara began noticing things about her husband that seemed strange for a simple farmer. The first thing she noticed was how Tom moved. When he walked through the fields, his steps were light and balanced. He never stumbled on the uneven ground or tripped over rocks. When he climbed up to fix the barn roof, he moved like a dancer, quick and graceful. This seemed unusual for someone who claimed to be just a farmer. One afternoon, Zara was hanging clothes outside to dry when a plate fell from the kitchen window. Before she could even react, Tom caught it in midair without looking up from the fence he was repairing. His hand moved so fast it was just a blur. "Good catch," Zara said, surprised. Tom looked at the plate in his hand as if he was surprised too. "Lucky reflexes, I guess." Another time, they were walking to the market in town when a child's ball rolled into their path. Tom stopped it with his foot and kicked it back to the children in one smooth motion. But the ball flew perfectly straight back to the boys' hands from 30 feet away. Zara had never seen anyone kick a ball with such perfect accuracy. The animals around the farm acted strange around Tom too. The wild creatures that lived in the nearby forest seemed to respect him. Zara noticed that dangerous predators like the razor-fanged prowlers would watch Tom from a distance but never came close to the house. Even the farm animals behaved differently around him. The horses stood straighter when he approached, and the guard dogs followed his commands instantly. One evening, Zara asked Tom about it. "The animals seem to really like you." "I've always been good with animals," Tom said. "Grandfather taught me to be calm around them. Animals can sense if you're afraid or angry, but it seemed like more than just being calm." The animals looked at Tom the way soldiers might look at their commander, with respect and maybe a little fear. The strangest thing happened during their 4th week of marriage. Zara woke up one night and found Tom's side of the bed empty. She looked out the window and saw him standing in the garden in just his pants. He was moving slowly through a series of positions, like some kind of exercise. His movements were smooth and controlled, almost like a dance. But there was something deadly about the way he moved, as if he was fighting invisible enemies. She watched for several minutes before Tom finished and came back inside. He never mentioned it, and Zara pretended to be asleep when he returned to bed. The biggest surprise came during their 5th week of marriage. Zara was in town buying supplies when the emergency sirens began to wail. People ran in panic through the streets. Someone shouted that space pirates were attacking the settlement of Green Hill, just 20 miles away. Tom appeared beside Zara, as if from nowhere. His gentle expression was gone, replaced by something cold and focused. "We need to organize evacuations," Tom said, but not to Zara. He was talking to Mayor Richards, who had just arrived. "Tom, thank goodness," the mayor said. "What should we do?" What happened next amazed Zara. Tom began giving orders with the confidence of a military commander. He told people where to set up defensive positions around the town. He knew exactly how to organize convoy routes for people to escape safely. He assigned teams to gather emergency supplies and coordinate communications. "Get all families with children to the underground shelters first," Tom instructed. "Set up roadblocks on the north and south roads. If pirates come here, we'll channel them through the main street where we can control the fight." People followed Tom's orders without question, as if they had always known he could take charge in a crisis. Within 2 hours, the town was organized for either defense or evacuation. The pirates never came to their town. They attacked Green Hill and left quickly with whatever they could steal. But Zara couldn't forget how Tom had taken control of the situation. He knew things about military tactics and emergency planning that no simple farmer should know. That night, after the crisis passed, Zara found Tom standing in their living room, staring up at the old sword above the fireplace. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his expression was troubled. "Tom," she said softly. He turned to her, and for a moment she saw something dark and dangerous in his eyes. Then his normal, gentle expression returned. "Just thinking about today," he said. "I hope those families in Green Hill are okay." "You knew exactly what to do during the emergency," Zara said. "Where did you learn all those things?" Tom was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather taught me to be prepared for anything. You never know what might happen on frontier planets like Haven." But as Zara looked at her husband standing beneath that ancient sword, she realized there was much more to Tom Miller than he had told her. The question was, what was he hiding, and why? It was a peaceful morning on Haven when the sky suddenly turned dark. Zara was in the garden picking tomatoes for lunch when she heard a sound like thunder, but there were no clouds. She looked up and her heart stopped. Massive alien ships were dropping out of hyperspace above the planet. Their hulls were black, and covered with weapon ports that glowed with evil red light. Zara had seen these ships before in military reports from her father's empire. They belonged to the Krillian Syndicate, one of the most feared pirate organizations in the galaxy. The emergency sirens began wailing across Haven. Tom came running from the fields, his face serious. More ships kept appearing until they blocked out the sun. There had to be at least 50 warships up there. "Get inside," Tom said, taking Zara's hand. Now they rushed into the house, just as the communication system activated. A harsh alien voice filled the air, speaking in galactic common language that everyone on Haven could understand. "Attention, inhabitants of Haven," the voice said. "This is War Commander Thane of the Krillian Syndicate. Your planet is now under our control. You have 12 hours to surrender completely. All military forces will lay down their weapons. All government officials will report for processing. Resistance will be met with complete destruction." The voice continued with more terrible demands. The Krillians wanted food supplies, valuable minerals, and worst of all, people to work as slaves in their mining operations. They would take anyone between the ages of 15 and 50 to work on distant planets until they died. Tom's hands clenched into fists as he listened. Zara had never seen him look so angry. His gentle farmer's expression was gone, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "We have to contact my father," Zara said, reaching for the long-range communicator. "The Velthani fleet can help us." She sent an emergency message to her father's empire, but the reply came back quickly and destroyed her hopes. The nearest Velthani fleet was 3 weeks away. By the time they arrived, Haven would already be under complete Krillian control, the Planetary Defense Force. Tom asked. Zara checked the military reports on her communicator. Haven's defense was hopeless. The planet only had 12 small patrol ships, and maybe 300 soldiers. The Krillians had brought enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. Through the windows they could see the first Krillian landing craft ascending toward the planet's surface. The ships were ugly and brutal-looking, designed to carry soldiers and heavy weapons. Tom walked to the living room window and stared out at the approaching enemy ships. "How many people live on Haven?" he asked quietly. "About 2 million, Zara replied. "Mostly farmers and their families." 2 million innocent people, Tom said, his voice growing harder. "They came here to build peaceful lives. They never hurt anyone." The first reports started coming in over the emergency channels. Krillian soldiers were landing in the major cities. They were dragging people from their homes and forcing them into groups. Anyone who resisted was being shot. Children were crying for their parents. Families were being torn apart. Tom listened to each report with growing fury. His jaw muscles tensed, and his hands trembled with rage. Zara had never seen her gentle husband look so terrible. "Tom," she said softly, "there's nothing we can do. We should hide until my father's ships arrive." Tom turned to look at her, and Zara stepped back in shock. His eyes burned with an anger so deep it frightened her. This was not the kind farmer she had married. This was someone else entirely. "Hide," Tom said, his voice low and dangerous, "while those monsters terrorize innocent families. While they drag children away from their parents to be slaves." More reports came over the radio. A school in the capital city had been attacked. The soldiers were loading teachers and older students onto transport ships. Parents who tried to stop them were being beaten or worse. Tom walked across the living room with slow, deliberate steps. He stopped in front of the fireplace and looked up at the old sword hanging there. The ancient weapon seemed to gleam in the dim light, as if it was waiting for something. "My grandfather told me stories," Tom said, still staring at the sword, "about the old days, when evil creatures threatened good people. He said there comes a time when peaceful men must choose between staying safe and doing what's right." Zara watched as Tom reached up toward the sword. His hand moved slowly, as if the weapon was calling to him. "Tom, what are you doing?" she asked. "Something I swore I would never do again," Tom replied. His fingers closed around the sword's leather handle, and the moment he touched it, everything changed. Tom's entire body seemed to transform. His back straightened, his shoulders squared, and his movements became fluid and controlled. The nervous farmer disappeared, replaced by someone who radiated deadly confidence. Tom lifted the sword down from its mount and held it before him. The blade caught the light and reflected it like a mirror. For the first time since the Krillians arrived, Zara felt a spark of hope. "Who are you?" she whispered. Tom turned to face her, and she saw something ancient and powerful in his eyes. "Someone who has been sleeping too long," he said. Outside, the Krillian ships continued landing, bringing more soldiers to terrorize the innocent people of Haven. But now they would face something they had never expected to find on this peaceful farming world. Tom held the ancient sword in his hands and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, Zara saw a man she had never met before. The gentle farmer was gone completely. In his place stood someone who radiated power and deadly purpose. "Tom, please tell me what's happening," Zara said. "My name is Tom Miller, and I am the last of the Terran Sword Saints," he said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "We were an order of human warriors who protected Earth's colonies from threats that technology could not stop. The Krillians destroyed my order 20 years ago. They thought they had killed us all." Zara stared at him in amazement. Terran Sword Saints were legends. Stories told to children about mythical warriors who could fight entire armies with just their blades. Most people believed they never really existed. "But you're a farmer," she whispered. "I chose to become a farmer," Tom corrected. "After my brothers in the Order were killed, I came to Haven hoping never to touch a sword again. I wanted to live peacefully, to grow things instead of destroying them. The emergency radio crackled with more terrible reports. Krillian soldiers were moving through the countryside now, attacking isolated farms. A family just 10 miles away was calling for help as their home was surrounded. Tom strapped a sword to his back and walked toward the door. "Stay here, Zara. Lock the doors and don't come out until I return. You can't fight an entire army by yourself," Zara said. Following him, it's impossible. Tom turned back to her with a sad smile. "My dear wife, you have no idea what is possible." He kissed her forehead gently, then walked outside into the growing darkness. Krillian landing craft were approaching their area, their engines roaring like angry beasts. Tom stood in his front yard and watched them come. The first transport ship landed in the field next to Tom's house. Its doors opened and 20 Krillian soldiers marched out. They were tall, lizard-like creatures, wearing heavy battle armor and carrying energy weapons. Their leader pointed at Tom and shouted orders in their harsh language. Tom drew his sword in one smooth motion. The blade sang as it cut through the air, and suddenly he was no longer standing in the same spot. He moved like liquid shadow across the field, faster than Zara thought possible. The first Krillian soldier raised his energy rifle, but Tom was already behind him. The ancient sword flashed once, and the alien's weapon fell in 2 pieces. Tom spun, and his blade cut through the soldier's armor as if it were made of paper. The other Krillians opened fire, their energy bolts lighting up the night. But Tom was never where their weapons were aimed. He flowed between the deadly beams like water, his sword deflecting the shots that came too close. Each deflected energy bolt flew back at the aliens, striking them down with their own weapons. Zara watched from the window as her husband moved through the enemy soldiers like death itself. His sword work was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Every movement was perfect, every strike exactly where it needed to be. In less than 2 minutes, all 20 soldiers lay motionless in the field. Tom stood among the fallen enemies, not even breathing hard. His sword gleamed clean in the starlight, as if it had never touched anything unclean. More Krillian ships were approaching. Tom looked up at them and smiled grimly. He began walking toward the town, where people were screaming for help. The second group of Krillians had landed in the town square and were dragging families from their homes. Tom arrived just as they were forcing children onto their transport ships. The sight of crying kids being torn from their parents filled him with cold rage. "Release them," Tom called out in a voice that carried across the entire square. The Krillian commander turned to see one human standing alone against 50 soldiers. The alien laughed and said something mocking in his own language. Tom's response was to move. He crossed the 50 yards, between himself and the enemy, in seconds. His sword carved through their energy weapons before they could fire. Krillian soldiers flew through the air as Tom's blade sent them spinning away from the innocent people they were threatening. The commander pulled out a massive plasma cannon and aimed it at the children. "Stop or they die," he snarled. Tom's answer was to throw his sword. The ancient blade spun through the air like a silver disc and struck the plasma cannon, splitting it perfectly in half. The weapon exploded harmlessly, and Tom caught his sword as it returned to his hand like a loyal pet. The Krillian commander's eyes widened in recognition. "No," he whispered. "You are extinct. We destroyed you all. You destroyed my brothers," Tom said, advancing slowly. "But you missed one." The commander tried to run, but Tom was faster. His sword flashed once more, and the alien leader joined his soldiers on the ground. The remaining Krillian forces on the planet heard the reports of what was happening. A single human with an ancient sword was cutting through their armies like they were helpless children. Stories spread quickly among the alien soldiers about the legendary Terran sword saints and their impossible fighting skills. By dawn, every Krillian transport ship was fleeing back to their main fleet. The soldiers who survived carried terrifying reports to their commanders about the human warrior, who moved like lightning and fought like a force of nature. Tom returned home as the sun rose, his sword clean and his clothes barely disturbed. Zara ran to him and threw her arms around him. "They're gone," she asked. "The ones on the planet are gone," Tom said, "but the fleet is still up there." High above Haven, War Commander Thane paced angrily on the bridge of his flagship. His communications officer kept receiving terrifying reports from the planet below. Entire squads of Krillian soldiers were retreating in panic, claiming they had been attacked by a single human warrior. "Impossible," Thane roared. "One human cannot defeat our armies." But the reports kept coming. The human carried an ancient sword and moved faster than their sensors could track. He cut through energy shields and deflected plasma bolts with his blade. Most disturbing of all, several survivors described his fighting style as identical to the legendary Terran sword saints. Thane's blood ran cold when he heard that name. Every Krillian commander knew the stories about the sword saints. 20 years ago, his people had spent enormous resources hunting down and destroying that order of human warriors. The Saints had been the only force in the galaxy that truly frightened the Krillian Syndicate. "Sir," his communication officer said nervously, "the surviving ground forces are requesting immediate evacuation. They refuse to land on the planet again." Thane studied the tactical reports. In 6 hours, one human had completely broken his invasion force. Hardened soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds were now too terrified to fight. Send a message to Krillian, High Command. Thane ordered. Tell them the Sword Saints have returned. We are withdrawing immediately, within 2 hours. The entire Krillian fleet jumped to hyperspace and fled the Haven system. On the planet below, Tom stood in his front yard, watching the enemy ships disappear into the stars. He still held his ancient sword, but now it felt heavy in his hands. For 20 years, he had hoped never to use it again. Zara walked out to stand beside him. They're really gone. Yes, Tom said. They won't come back. The Krillians are cowards at heart. They only attack when they think they can win easily. Will you tell me the truth now? Zara asked gently, about who you really are. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, telling her everything. He described his childhood training with the Sword Saints on distant Terra. He explained how the Order dedicated their lives to protecting innocent people from threats that normal military forces could not handle. We were not many, Tom said. Maybe 300 warriors in total. But we trained from childhood to move faster, fight better, and think more clearly than anyone else in the galaxy. Our swords were forged from rare metals and blessed by ancient ceremonies. They could cut through almost anything. He told her about the Krillian war against his order, how the aliens had tracked down every Sword Esteen and killed them one by one. Tom had been on a mission to a distant world when his brothers were destroyed. He returned to find everything he loved burned to ashes. I came to Haven because it was peaceful, Tom continued. I wanted to grow things instead of destroying them. I thought if I never touched my sword again, maybe I could forget the violence and pain. But you couldn't, Zara said. No, Tom admitted. When I heard those children crying today, when I saw families being torn apart, I remembered why the Sword Saints existed. Some evils are too great to ignore. Zara took his hand. There's something I need to tell you too. My father didn't arrange our marriage just for the farming alliance. Tom looked at her with surprise. Father knew who you were, Zara explained. The Velthani Empire has old records about the Sword Saints. When our intelligence agents reported that Tom Miller of Haven was the last survivor, Father saw an opportunity. He wanted a weapon, Tom said bitterly. No, Zara said firmly. He wanted to give you a reason to live again. Father said that warriors without purpose often die from sadness. He thought if you had a family, a home to protect, maybe you would find peace. Tom stared at her. Your father sent you to marry a broken soldier. He sent me to marry a good man who had lost his way, Zara corrected, and he was right. These past weeks, watching you work in the garden, seeing how kind you are to your neighbors, I fell in love with the farmer, not the warrior. They stood together in silence as the first rays of dawn painted the sky pink and gold. Tom looked down at the sword in his hands. It had been his constant companion for so many years, but it had also brought him so much pain. What happens now? He asked. Now you choose, Zara said. You can put the sword away and go back to being a farmer. Haven is safe, and there are no more enemies to fight. Tom considered this. The peaceful life still appealed to him. He could return to growing crops and living quietly with his wife. But Zara continued, if you keep the sword, you could help other worlds that face threats like Haven did today. There are still pirates and tyrants out there hurting innocent people. Tom looked at his wife with new understanding. She was not just offering him choices. She was offering to support whatever he decided. What do you want? Tom asked. I want to be with the man I married, Zara said. Whether he's a farmer who grows the best tomatoes in the sector, or a legendary warrior who protects the innocent. You are both of those people, Tom. You don't have to choose between them. Tom smiled for the first time since the crisis began. He walked to the house and hung his sword back above the fireplace. But this time it felt different. The sword was not hidden away in shame. It was simply waiting, ready if it was ever needed again. So, Zara said, taking his hand, what does a retired sword saint do for breakfast? The same thing any farmer does. Tom replied with a grin. He makes pancakes for his wife.